the Friday episode of the Donovan Bandits. I'm Oren Phillips, and today we're talking all things Ithacon. That's right, it is Ithacon season. April 27th, April 28th. Go to ithacon.org. Get your tickets now. Why are we talking about it? Because it's awesome, and because Ed Catto's on the show. Ed is one of the guys behind Ithacon. He's been helping run it for years. Also, cool note, Ed writes for our friends at TwoMorrows Publishing. If you read Back Issue Magazine, you've probably seen his articles. He just had a great article about Herb Novik for the last issue, which has dealt with the unheralded artists of Batman. So Ed is a fantastic guy. Great stories. He's going to tell you all about what's going on at Ithacon this year. You're going to want to go after hearing all this. But check it out. Here's Ed. Mr. Ed Catto. Ed, thank you so much.
Oh, Oren, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate all your support, but I'm not really the man who runs it all. It's a big team effort. We'll get into all that, but you know, I have no problem taking glory for so many things, but this one I probably shouldn't.
Well, let's start way back at the very beginning. How did you first discover comics?
Oh gosh, it's so crystal clear for me. So I was one of those little kids with the Adam West TV show, and that was like, you know, holy smokes. But comics were intertwined with being an Italian American when I was little, because we'd go over to my grandmother's every Sunday for Sunday dinner, which was like a big fat lunch in the middle of the day, and we'd have macaroni, different macaronis. Once in a while, lasagna would make it in the mix. But afterwards, we had this tradition. We'd go to, I guess it's called a convenience store. We didn't call it a convenience store back then, but this great place called Pauline's, which of course was run by one of my Italian relatives. And we could always, my dad said, okay, pick out one thing for me and my brother. And he'd always pick out something like a paddle ball or squirt gun, something that would get broken soon. And I'd always pick a comic, like I'd get one comic and one comic and one comic and one comic. And that's where it all started. And man, from the TV show to Italian pasta to comic books, it was like a direct line. And I just, my brain's been in it ever since, Oren.
So what was the first con you ever attended as a fan?
Oh, so the first con I ever went to was Ithacon.
Okay.
So I grew up in this area nearby Ithaca, and kind of like learning, about things and seeing ads for 1976 Marvel Con. I had that poster on my wall, and then there was a flyer in the Phase drugstore for this Ithacon. I was like, this we got it, Mom, you got to take me, Dad, you got to take me. And they took me, and I'm unclear if it was the first Ithacon number 1 or number 2. It was either 1 or 2. I think it was number 2. And I went, and my brain just exploded to be able to buy old comics and meet pros. I was just kind of recognizing people's styles, and it was magical. And I just wanted to stay, every minute, stay till Monday. And man, I loved it. It was a great experience for me.
So who was the first pro that you met?
Well, yeah, I remember those early days. They had Al Milgram, Len Wein, and Marv Wolfman, and Nova had just come out, and they were doing this crossover with Amazing Spider-Man and Nova, and Mike Golden had just started doing Micronauts, and then Marv I got to be friends with later on. We did a couple projects together. He helped with our Captain Action stuff, and he was one of the writers we were working with for one of the animation iterations. So so weird from being that kid. But the person I remember the most was Walter Simonson had just come out with that beautiful black and white Rampaging Hulk book, and inked by Alfredo Alcala, a little heavy on the inks, but I loved his inking. And he was there, and I had my copy at home, and I bought another copy for like $3. And should I make this investment? And I think it was actually a little more complicated than that. But anyway, so I got a copy, and he signed it, and he was very kind and very like encouraging to this young stupid kid. And I was probably like, "Can you please sign this?" And that was great. And now come full circle, like Walter's going to be one of the guests back at Ithacon, and I've worked with him on a few projects over the years, and he's always been nothing but gracious and kind every stinking time. And it was great. So yeah, so we went from meeting some of those pros back then to to today.
So at what point in your life do you say, I want to be involved in the comic scene in some way, shape, or form?
That took me a while to figure out. Probably I was like 3 or 3.5, Yeah. No, forever. I mean, like so many kids, I wanted to grow up and be Neil Adams. I mean, that's what I wanted to do, be Neil Adams. And he was busy being Neil Adams. So, we tried to find some other ways around it. And I think with me too, like, I don't know if I could go back, if I would have gone all in. I kind of had a more traditional career in marketing and advertising, which was wonderful. And then every step of the way, I'd try and find a way to get a little more into comics. So, I'm at Nabisco, and we do a deal with Marvel when this MasterCard thing falls through. And, I needed some ad work done in print. And I kind of knew the people at Valiant, and I called them, and little by little I did like different things. And I guess the funny part is like all the different ways I've kind of touched, the world of comics, and it's all been a great joy for me as a person.
Now, I want to talk about Ithacon, but you also do work with our friends over at TwoMorrows. You write a lot of wonderful articles for Back Issue and other publications. How did you first get in touch with them, and how has that relationship been for you?
Oh, that relationship has been great. I guess the way that we got to know the TwoMorrows people was through our Captain Action project. So just quick summary, I know you know this, but years ago, a partner and I, now we have a third partner, we acquired the IP Captain Action, 1960s superhero toy, and we've brought him back, and we're trying all different things. We got some good stuff coming up. We've had some ups and downs. We've sold toys in Toys R Us and comics at Dynamite and Moonstone, and it's been a lot of fun. But one of the things that we did was this fellow Michael Urie from TwoMorrows had written the like definitive book on Captain Action. So we worked with him and TwoMorrows to do another round of publication. The book was so perfect. It was just perfect. And so we did the second volume, and the cover was a little spiffed up, a hardcover, gorgeous book. And that's how we started to know the TwoMorrows people. I remember we had an event at the Jeppy Museum with Captain Action, and John Morrow, the publisher, came with all these books, and we sold those. And then from there, it was, a little bit like, I don't know, geez, I love that Back Issue magazine. I'd love to contribute. Well, maybe you can. So little by little, just getting more and more involved. And most recently, I wrote an article for this current issue, all Batman issue, spotlighting Batman artists of the 1970s who weren't Neil Adams, Jim Aparo, or Nick Cardy, like all the other guys who are super talented individuals. Right. And I wrote about Irv Novick, and that was so much fun to write about.
And that's the wonderful thing about not only I loved your article. I texted you about it. It was so great, but what Back Issue does and what you guys do is putting a spotlight on these guys. I think sometimes younger comic fans, and even, my generation, sometimes they forget the names. They might know the art, but they don't know the names. But to tell these guys stories and what the contributions they've made to the industry, I think it's so important so we don't forget all these people who have done so much for us.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, they're so interesting too. And most of those older creators, well, I mean, almost all of them weren't necessarily fans. It's not like the story that so many, folks have where it's like, oh man, I loved comics and I was buying Image in the 90s and I wanted to be an artist. Instead it's like, well, I was in the army and then I did these cigarette ads and then I got involved with it. It's like, wow, what a crazy career. And from all that, you drew Batman for 4 years. Like, how cool is that? So yeah, the stories are just great.
I also have to ask, why Captain Action? Because it's funny. I just recorded an episode a couple weeks ago. Two guys who are toy collectors, and we're talking about how the Captain Action figure is genius because it's one figure that you can keep, and then you could just buy these different outfits to put on him. And you don't have to go out and buy different things. He's a one-stop shop, and you just make him whoever you want him to be.
Yeah, it's a funny concept because it is genius. They call it, like in toys, like the razor blade theory. Like you buy a razor and then you get the blades,
right?
But you bought the one razor, and that kind of keeps you coming back to that brand. But for action figures, like anyone under 30 is like, what? You like take the outfit and you put it, what? There were, a generation that's been brought up, buying, I want X-Men, so I'm gonna have 7 X-Men guys and put them on my shelf. It's hard to understand, but yeah, it's a marvelous concept and it's so much fun and it's got a lot of legs and a lot of life to it. So we're having a lot of fun with that project.
That's awesome. Now let's talk Ithacon. Big show this year. I mean, the guests.
Oh, yeah.
I keep checking the site. A few of the folks, Roger Stern, of course, the Simonsons, Don Simpson, Bill Anderson, a lot of great talent coming in.
Oh, absolutely. And some of those folks, like, we're very blessed. Roger lives in town and he's a fantastic guest. And he's very kind and generous with his time. And then also, Ithacon is one of those shows that I think folks generally, pros, have a good time where they talk with people like you there and, form bonds. So yeah, we've had like Don Simpson. So happy to have Don come back. We recruited him because he was complaining about another convention that, like, he was mad about something. And we said, Don, come to we'll treat you like a king. We love you. We love you. And then after we made that offer, it's like, oh boy, we better deliver on that, right? We better make sure we do a nice job. And he's had a pretty good time. And we try and roll out the red carpet. And Bob Harrison coming back, Pop Culture Squad, and Mike Gold. Yeah, Mike Gold, who now, like, all these guys. Like, Mike is just a great guy in about 20 different levels. Super smart, super funny, super principled. And but we've got some new folks coming too, and that's fun. So one person we have coming is Shelley Bond. Shelley Bond, long time. You might know her as Vertigo editor. You might know her as here's some just so happen to have some props. When she did her Black Crown line of comics over at IDW. Now she does these amazing Kickstarter products, but she was a great editor, is a great editor, but she's also an Ithaca College alumna. So Ithacon is a unique convention. It's a real big boy convention, but we tie it into a learning opportunity. So we get a class where I teach students, and then we have them learn how to, put on a top-notch professional show. And to get Shelley Bond and her husband, who's a fantastic artist in his own right, Philip Bond, to come to Ithacon is really fun. And we're going to drag Shelley in a day early and have her go teach a bunch of classes too, and have students learn from her. So yeah, so that's great. And who else? Dean Haspiel. You probably noticed Dean. Dean Haspiel, fantastic individual, funny, smart, courageous with his entrepreneurism. We're so excited to have Dean come for the first time. And let's see, we got so many folks. I just came from the class, in fact. we have all the Ahoy people coming who you've met before, and that's pretty great. So Ahoy celebrating its 5th year. We have people like Hart Seeley, the publisher, Frank Camuso, Tom Pyre, and that'll be great. And in fact, Oren, we've got, I'm not sure if you know this. Oh, I guess I can we'll break some news on your show.
Sure.
We've got 3 publishers. So we have Ahoy coming. They're great. And then we have this great publisher, A Wave Blue World, and the founder and publisher, Philip Tyler Chin, and they're doing cool books. And in fact, he is doing a variant for Mazo Volume 3 for Ithacon. So we'll have our first variant cover.
Very cool.
And then also we were planning on doing a panel on the Disney property Gargoyles cartoon from the 80s or 90s. And that kind of spun into an opportunity, and we reached out to our friends at Dynamite, and we have Joe Rybank coming up from Dynamite.
Nice.
And they're contributing all these great books to our goodie bags and doing portfolio reviews. And we're going to have a Gargoyles panel and a Space Ghost panel. The Space Ghost panel is going to be really nutty. Like, Space Ghost was a cartoon from the 60s, maybe a little before your time, but to evoke that notion of like watching Saturday morning cartoons, we're bringing in cereal and milk and spoons, so you can eat your cereal and watch some Space Ghost cartoons, and that'll be a lot of fun.
Because here's what Ithacon is: a con for comic fans. It's not a con that they have a couple comics here and then it's people from different things, and where it's just a mishmash of things. This is a thing for people who love comics, who love talking comics, who love buying comics. And I thought that was the most wonderful thing about it, that it was just this really nice sense of community at Ithacon with everybody there.
There is a very nice sense of community. We started a thing called the Turner Awards, which were named after Bill Turner. Now, he's the guy who started it. He started it 47 plus years ago, still very much involved. Great individual, you know him now. And the Turner Awards were meant to kind of like make a nod at some of those folks. So last year, one of the people we honored was Kim Draheim, who's been a dealer at the show all these years, right? He has all the stories. Oh yeah, back in 1997, I remember, it's like, wow, that how cool is that? So yeah, it's a great show for people who love comics and creativity. And like this year, we've done it a few times in the past. This year, we'll really focus on editing and editors and their role, which is kind of cool. And then the one asterisk that I would really make, Oren, is we also use Ithacon for an opportunity to celebrate creativity and people with an entrepreneurial spirit. So we do have, a lot of comic, less so people who maybe are like television or movie stars. Although we do have J.G. Hertzler, who's a fantastic guy who played a Klingon in Star Trek and the bad guy in Zorro. But also we celebrate like crafters or local people making their own comics. That I think that idea of, we can kind of fan the flames of their creativity. We have a whole row of independent authors, and we love to put them on a pedestal. And, not only are they great at writing, but they've all had to learn how to be very good at business and self-promotion. And it's nice to help promote them too.
I was going to say, in this day and age we have now, independent comics with the Kickstarters and all that, they're really making a mark in the comic world today. I mean, you still have your Marvel, your DC, and your Image, but there's independent comics everywhere, and they're comics for everyone. It's not just superheroes. It's not just, war stories, something like that. It's anything you can think of, they can make a comic about it.
Oh, yeah. And I think like we'll talk to Dean Haspiel and Shelley Bond a little bit about that. I was just at South by Southwest, and one panel, it was about the recording industry, but the lessons were the same. This woman said, this very talented Italian woman, she said, I'm never going to be a superstar or a household name, but I figured out a way so I can make a very comfortable living making songs. So she makes songs and then she sells them directly to her fans. No, no agent, no label. And you're like, well, that's nice. And I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, good for her. Maybe her partner, makes a lot of money or something, but good for her. And then the guy, the moderator says, well, would you mind telling the audience how much you made last year? Just selling, making your stuff, selling directly. She says, oh, last year I made $2 million American, like 2 million US. Like, holy smokes. And that's, not going wide and making, 50 cents off of every, record album or concert or whatever, who buys record albums. But, instead going deep with the people who love her. And that's, I think, what people like, Dean and Shelley and Billy Tucci and Rick Offenberger, all those guys, those people find folks who love what they do and, focus their creativity to satiate that consumer need.
And something you mentioned before, and I have to give my hats off to the students who you have working with you there and the class you teach, that they were, so kind and so helpful to everyone there. And talk a little bit how that program works and how important it is for these young people to be involved.
Oh, sure. So at Ithaca College, I made a pivot a few years ago and got into teaching. I was supposed to move up to upstate New York and just do consulting, and I got sucked into teaching, and I just love it. It's so much fun. So at the Ithaca College School of Business, I focus on entrepreneurism, but then there's this notion like if you're a startup, you got to know how to run, how to make the best out of trade shows and pop-ups, because they can be a time suck or an energy suck or a money suck if you do them wrong. As part of that, we teach this class about how to run a trade show / convention, Ithacon. We kind of blur the lines a little bit where we bring in a lot of great creators to zoom in and to speak to the students. So, they'll talk to Paul Levitz or Dan DiDio, or, it's just beautiful. But then they're taught how to run a convention. And I had spent a few years working for Reed Elsevier, and I helped them launch New York Comic-Con in year 2 and then beyond. It happened the first year. So I learned a lot about trade shows. I wasn't only doing that show, but I learned a lot about trade shows. And, I think like the standards that Bill Turner brought to Ithacon and people he worked with like Carmela Merlot and Catherine Kittredge, they all had very high standards. So it's not meant to be, my dad has a garage, let's put on a show. Instead, it's like, okay, let's do a professional show that, we can stand right up there with any show and say, we're proud of what we did. And it's not just because so many of the people are youthful that it's down a few clicks. Instead, that we're super proud. So, we hammer that home, and, we work really hard. Some of the students, they get into this class and they're like, wait a second, I thought this was just going to be fun. You got us working like crazy, and all those emails, you're killing me, professor. And I said, well, too bad. After the show, we'll have a Diet Coke and laugh about it. But for now, we got to work hard. So these students, we divide them into different teams, and each student team learns a different facet. Sometimes it's something they know, like sometimes we'll get a design person on the poster team or the program book team. We've got a woman who's in charge of the web design, and she's our webmaster, and she didn't know anything about web design before this. So she had to learn very, very quickly and, get up to speed quickly. And she's doing a great job. Like, it worked out. She figured out how to do that. So, we're working with these folks to ensure that they're doing a good job. And then the other weird part about it, Oren, is that, every year it's new people. It's like if you had a company, but you wake up, in September and it's like, where are all my employees? Who are these people? What's your name again? What are you good at? What are you bad at? So we get all new folks, and it's absolute madness, but it's very rewarding when it goes well, and knock on wood, it's gone well for 47 years. Maybe I'll screw it up this year, but
This is the
it's
year.
gone well for 47 years. I hope not.
So when you're planning a con, we have this one coming up in April. When does planning for Ithacon 2025 begin?
It's already started. We're halfway through it. Oh yeah. So much of these conventions have such a long lead time because you've got to secure the space and start to think about things going forward. I mean, I was really impressed with Shelton Drum's Heroes Con that I went down to last year in Charlotte. And that's always on Father's Day weekend. And the program book, he had a beautiful program book, and the back cover had this Joe Jusko Doctor Strange illustration. I'm like, geez, Joe Jusko's not at this show. And then you realize, like, here we go. Next year, come back next year on the back cover to meet Joe Jusko and get ready for next year. And here's the dates. And, that's like the right way to do it. You can tell a lot of planning had gone into it. And, I think that's a gold standard. I think Shelton is such a skillful show promoter that, I could learn more than a few things from him, but that's the gold standard that we try and get in terms of planning.
So could you tell us a little bit of the history of Ithacon? How did it start and its sort of place in the con world?
Oh, sure. So, Ithacon is one of those shows that, in the old days, before there was, Facebook groups, which I guess, Facebook aging a little older now even, but before there were ways to gather, it was hard to find all the people who were your tribe, right? Maybe if you lived in a big city, or maybe you would write to the people in a letter column, because they'd have their address. And maybe that would happen. Ithacon had a comic book club with a bunch of younger fellas, and then Bill Turner was part of the club and had this notion to start a comic convention. Now, Bill's background was very much like the science fiction convention world, which in the old days was a much bigger deal, very robust. And in fact, a lot of times, like, some of those early conventions started because the sci-fi convention people, like, we don't want those rotten, comic book people. Those guys are weird. Let them do their own thing. So he started this Ithacon in the town of Ithaca. It was run by the comic book club. Didn't have anything to do with any college or university back then. And every year he kept going on and on and on and on. And, I went as a little kid. I did my undergraduate work at Cornell University, which is also in the town of Ithaca. So I was a part of the Ithaca Comic Book Club then, and I helped run the shows. And, I had a ball, and that was really fun and engaging. And, growing up, Ithacon was one of those shows that would always get these top-notch guests. So it was guys like Kurt Swan, Murphy Anderson, Mike Kaluta, Al Williamson, kind of punching above its weight, and with just this fantastic lists of folks. And I can remember I didn't have to, it was my great honor to ink a Kurt Swan pencil illustration of Superman for a convention. And Murphy Anderson was one of my heroes. And let me tell you, my inking is nowhere near Murphy Anderson. Wasn't then, isn't now. And so that was great fun. So Ithacon continued on and moved around to some places and kind of bobbed and weaved as it morphed. But some folks, I think it always had a very good reputation for treating guests well, treating attendees well. And from all that, the dealers always made, maybe, I don't know if they make a lot of money or if they make a reasonable amount. So we always have dealers who want to come because it's got that rep that, we set them up straight. We make sure not too many dealers, the same type, and all those things. So, so folks are happy. So San Diego is the longest continuous running comic convention. Ithacon is number 2, 47 years, couple odd breaks with COVID, but still kind of cranking it out. And then Shelton Drum with HeroesCon is number 3. And it's quite a privilege, and we got to keep it going so Shelton doesn't overtake Ithacon. We can't ever miss a year. But it's like, holy cow, what a great group to run with, or to be a part of. And guys like, Bill Turner and I went down to HeroesCon this year, and it was so nice to have Bill and Shelton meet, two guys who've been doing this all these years, and that high level of passion. And it was great. I mean, I'm not a spring chicken, but I was the young kid in that little combo, so that was cool.
So who is your white whale of a guest? The one that you've always wanted, and either just didn't happen or that you would just love to have?
Oh gosh. So many. I guess Ithacon's had a lot of great folks over the years. And I was doing another convention in Syracuse, and we brought Neil Adams, and that was really fun. That was kind of like the white whale-y thing.
Yeah.
And then we did some fun things like I had this idea. That convention was on Adams Street. So I petitioned the mayor to name it Neil Adams Street for that time. And instead he said, let's declare Saturday Neil Adams Day. So we presented, Neil, and, in some ways he was very, unmodest person. And otherwise he was very, very modest. And like, I can remember when we surprised him with that, he just rolled his eyes. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this to me. This is so silly. So yeah, he's one of those guys. Jim Steranko, I guess, of that era. Jim Steranko is always very, very kind to me. He might be a white whale guy. We had a thing where I heard it on a podcast one time where Bendis's daughter wanted to go to veterinary school, and Cornell, right next door to Ithaca, has a good veterinarian school. And so we reached out to him. It's like, we'll get your daughter to the tour of the veterinarian school. And these are the lengths we go to, right? Like, how crazy. But yeah, geez, I don't know. So many folks who are just good people, and we become friends with, like Mark Wheatley is a phenomenal artist, phenomenal creator. And every stinking year that guy gets busy at this. And I think he really genuinely wants to come be a guest. But we laugh, and it's like, okay, Ed, yeah, I'll get you next year for sure. And then it's like, oh, what are the dates again? Oh, and we'll ask his wife, Carol, what? Oh, sorry, Ed. So yeah, some of those folks who I just know, like Mark Wheatley, case in point, super kind, super talented, very, very gracious with guests and inspirational. And I think that's the type of people that we love to get because, whereas San Diego got very big, and in many ways, HeroCon is very big, Ithacon, part of the personality that Bill and Carmela imbued it with was to be small and, very, very doable. And, we want to have people like that. We had Walter Simonson was up the year before the pandemic, must have been 2019. We had him as a guest. And there was one picture, it's one of my favorite pictures of Ithacon, where this little boy, Walter did a sketch, and he was like handing it to this boy, gratis, of course, right? And, the boy had no idea who this fellow was. He seemed like a nice artist man. And, and you think, like, man, that never happens, like at New York Comic Con or at San Diego, to have that moment, to interact with one of the top, professionals in an industry in such a kind and intimate moment. So, that's part of the magic of it all, I think.
I had that also as a fan, because that Kurt Swan story, that's hard to beat. But what are some of the coolest moments for you that you're kind of, as a fanboy, you're just like, wow, I can't believe this is happening?
Oh yeah, well, in that vein, to shake hands with Murphy Anderson And Murphy Anderson was very involved with the Captain Action project. So then years later, to become a friend of him and his family, and to get to know him right till the end. And that was like it all started at Ithacon. And one time as a kid, like in the days before merchandising, you had to do it yourself, right? So if you wanted a Charlton shirt, you had to make it yourself. And I made a Fantastic Four shirt, right? So this blue shirt with the Fantastic Four logo, and John Burns is a guest, and he's like holding court, and I came into the room, and he's like, "Oh, look, there's Reed Richards." I'm like, "Oh, like John Byrne noticed, little teenage Ed Catto. Wow, that's cool." Like he's noticing me. Like that was pretty cool. That was a great, Ithacon moment, I guess. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. So many good things, and just having a lot of laughs and fun with so many people, and it really is set up in such a way that you can do that.
Now, do you ever get time, a couple minutes to yourself to walk around, to look at comics, to, be a guest at your own con?
Oh yeah, well I'll tell you, there's we get this great fella, maybe you met him, Harold Sipe, and his wife Meg Stevenson, and they are super comic fans. Harold had an Image comic back in the day, but now they do games, card games. And Harold's become a great buddy over the years. And we always try and find 5 minutes to just go through the back issues and find some treasures. He got this amazing Mary Marvel comic last year that was just in pristine condition, a beautiful cover. And it's like, well, that's a nice little Ithacon find. And yeah, so that's yeah, it's fun. Sometimes when you're running, it's like, I don't know, the father of the bride or something. You can't enjoy the food and the wine because you're running all the stuff. But that's okay. But I mean, even like this year, like we get a lot of our great friends, but like Glenn Whitmore, who's a fantastic artist and colorist. He'll be talking about Spider-Man. And then we've got like Chris Condon coming, who did that series, That Texas Blood. And he just came out with a new Image book called Night People. And he's like, younger and passionate and doing like really kind of groundbreaking things. Like I want to go sit in on his panel and just hear what he has to say. I'm anxious to make that work.
Is it exciting for you to see when parents bring their kids and to start a younger generation of comic readers at cons like this, and to get to know the con culture?
It is. We're not, well, as I mean, like we're not a kiddie thing. We have some kids come,
Right.
and we have some kid activities, but we don't get a lot of kids. In fact, we have kids come free. So it's kind of hard to, help activate the brainwashing, with, because you get a small amount. But yeah, it's great. And I'm thinking like there's this great Professor Brad Treat at Ithaca College, and he brings his kids, and they'll wear their Halloween outfits, his cosplay, and he takes them for an hour or two, and they have fun, and that's pretty cool. And I think maybe if it's not a scary thing, or a very welcoming community, which I think it is, like how great is that? And then maybe they'll find something they love, or they'll start with manga or some art, or Teen Titan Go 10 years ago, and find their way in. And yeah, that's great. And it's super when when people get that passion sparked, and that's very encouraging.
That's awesome. And where can folks get themselves some tickets to this?
Oh yeah, you bet. Well, all your listeners have to go to ithacon.org. We're selling tickets there. We also have this amazing thing, Oren, with goodie bags. So for the first couple hundred folks that get tickets, we give them a goodie bag, and that's filled with all these amazing products from all of our great partners. Last year, I can remember I just grabbed one randomly, and retail value was $90 in this goodie bag. I think average, truthfully, is probably about $40. So, if you buy a ticket for $10, you're one of the early birds, you're gonna have $30, $40 worth of stuff. So it's makes it another way so that it's a great bargain.
Most definitely. And it's, like I said, I went for the first time last year. I had such a blast. Your staff, everyone involved does such a wonderful job. And, it's not like you said, it's a smaller con. So you can sit there and you can have a conversation with Roger Stern. Like you can go over and talk to Mike Gold or Don Simpson. Like there's not people breathing down your neck, having to hurry up. You can talk to these guys, and it's such an amazing experience.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, we talk about convention concepts like aisle density, which means having the right amount of people there so that it's not too crowded, but it doesn't feel like you're at a party where nobody came. And so we want to have it the right amount, and we work hard to find that Goldilocks zone. And I think typically we do, and typically we have opportunities for you find your jam, and then you can have a lot of fun and talk to the guys at Ahoy for 15 minutes or 20 minutes and have some laughs, and that's pretty great. Whereas and I love big conventions. I'm not one of those guys who like I love the madness and the crowds at San Diego and New York. I do like that, but this is such a different thing. It's like it's like apple pie and waffles. They're very different things, but in their own way. And this size convention is it's like apple pie, so it's fun.
Most definitely. Well, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do for all of us to put this together, because it's so much heavy lifting, I can imagine, but when it all comes together, it comes together so well, and everyone has such a great time.
Oh, well, we appreciate it. We appreciate the shout out. We're just so impressed with your level of diligence and Dollar Bin Bandits. It seems like you guys get bigger and bigger, and man, you get some great guests, and just love listening to you guys. So it's all good.
We appreciate it. And when you have, well, I'll see you at Ithacon, but when we have more stuff coming on for Captain Action, we'll come on back on. Let's talk Captain Action.
Oh, let's do it. Yeah, we got some good stuff, some good licenses. We're planning for San Diego. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow some good stuff to show you. You bet.
That's awesome. Well, Ed, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we all see you guys at Ithacon, and stop by and say hello.
All right. Thanks so much, Oren. Thanks so much, Dollar Bin.
All right. And I'll cut at this point, obviously, but I'm going to push to have it for maybe next Friday. So that way we'll have it, and that way there's time for them to get tickets and stuff like that. And I'm also going to have the guys, I just recorded my intro for this Wednesdays with Roger McKenzie, and I brought Ithacon up in the intro. So we'll do that coming up for that as well.
Oh, sugar, I should have told you my Frank Miller story. So when I was a kid, well, I'll just tell you as a person. Yeah. So when I was a kid, Jim Shooter often came. And I had one of those long conversations with him. They had like Ithacon, 13 and a half at a mall, and it was dead. And so little Ed Catto talked to Jim Shooter for like, an hour. He was probably ready to shoot me. But one year he had a cancellation. So he brought this new guy named Frank Miller. And I was reading Daredevil, and Roger McKenzie was still writing it then. And, like some of the perspective was forced, or the figures were not quite there with the early days of Miller. But me and my buddies, we loved his stuff. It was like, we know that guy. We're reading Daredevil, like before Frank Miller was Frank Miller. And I can remember he was super shy guy in those days. And, who knew, the heights in which he'd go. But that was, one of those things that only happens at a small con.
Right. You couldn't get away with that at, San Diego Comic-Con or something like that.
No way.
And we are back. Oh, Ithacon's gonna be awesome. Did you hear that lineup, guys? Roger Stern, Walt and Louise Simonson, Don Simpson, and the list keeps going and going and going. Go to ithacon.org. Check out the guest list. Get your tickets today. That swag bag he's talking about, I got my tickets early, so I'm going to be in line for one of those. I can't wait to see what it's all about. And how cool is it that he got to, ink a Kurt Swan piece of art? That's pretty phenomenal. So I want to see you in the back. I want to see it at Ithacon. I want to see you all at Ithacon. And check out Back Issue Magazine. Get your subscription. Go to TwoMorrows.com, TwoMorrowsPublishing.com. I love Back Issue Magazine. I have a subscription myself. Ed writes some great stuff. Dan Johnson, Michael Urey doing the editing for it. It's a great list of guys doing writing and research for that. So have a great weekend. We will see you soon. And hopefully I'll see you all at Ithacon. Bye.